When Donald Trump promises to pardon the January 6th defendants currently in the D.C. jail during the first minute of his administration, it is essential to understand who these individuals are. These defendants include some of the most violent offenders from the Capitol riot, individuals already convicted, awaiting sentencing, or standing trial for crimes like attacking law enforcement officers. When Trump describes these individuals as hostages and characterizes their actions as a day of love, he is advocating for the release of people proven guilty of violent felonies, effectively positioning himself against law enforcement. Analyzing the data reveals that nearly 2,000 people were arrested, investigated, and prosecuted in connection with January 6th. Many nonviolent offenders either faced no charges, pleaded guilty to minor offenses, or served brief sentences. Those who received little or no jail time, often less than 2 months, have already been released. The only individuals still incarcerated are those who committed the most serious and violent crimes. Breaking down the numbers, 57% of those still in the D.C. jail assaulted police officers. Additionally, 83% of the remaining inmates committed other violent acts, possessed weapons, or engaged in behavior that endangered public safety. These individuals either pleaded guilty or were convicted of violent felonies, ensuring their continued incarceration. To put this in perspective, of the 1,570 individuals who pleaded guilty or were sentenced, approximately 534 were classified as nonviolent offenders. Half of these nonviolent offenders received no jail time at all, while 138 served sentences of 2 months or less. The average sentence for nonviolent offenders was 4.3 months. These individuals are already out of jail, rendering Trump's promises irrelevant to them. In contrast, the 319 violent offenders faced much harsher penalties. Only 27 avoided jail time, while the remainder received an average sentence of 30 months. Among the 184 individuals who directly assaulted police officers, the average sentence was 44 months. Those involved in organized attempts to prevent the peaceful transfer of power received average sentences of 102 months. This data underscores that the individuals Trump pledges to pardon are not peaceful protesters, but violent criminals convicted of serious offenses. For instance, David Dempsey, a prominent January 6th defendant, received a 240-month sentence, 20 years, for attacking police officers with a flagpole, crutches, pepper spray, and furniture. Despite this, Dempsey expressed confidence that Trump would secure his release, even suggesting supporters should not party too hard as he expected to be freed within 6 months if Trump is reelected. Such expectations highlight the broader concern. Trump's willingness to pardon violent offenders undermines the rule of law and endangers public safety. It also raises troubling questions about his stance on law enforcement, especially given his track record of disparaging military and police personnel. Trump's support for January 6 defendants stands in stark contrast to the sacrifices made by law enforcement officers, 140 of whom were injured during the Capitol attack. Some officers suffered psychological trauma, and at least 2 later died by suicide. Despite these realities, Trump and his supporters continue to perpetuate misleading narratives about January 6th, portraying violent rioters as innocent bystanders or patriotic demonstrators. For example, they often circulate images of elderly women holding American flags, falsely suggesting these scenes depict the Capitol riot. In truth, such images are from unrelated events, weaponized to downplay the severity of the attack and whitewash the actions of those involved. The tragic consequences of January 6th cannot be ignored. The assault on law enforcement, the disruption of Congress, and the broader attack on democracy inflicted lasting damage. Trump's proposed pardons threaten to validate this behavior, encouraging future acts of political violence and destabilizing the rule of law. It is also noteworthy that Trump criticized the Biden administration's decision to commute the sentences of death row inmates, falsely implying they were released into society. In reality, these inmates will remain incarcerated for life without parole. Trump's outrage over commutations for inmates who pose no threat to public safety starkly contrasts with his eagerness to release January 6 defendants who attacked law enforcement. Examining Trump's actions and rhetoric reveals a pattern of undermining law enforcement and glorifying violence. His embrace of individuals like David Dempsey reflects a broader effort to delegitimize democratic institutions and incite his supporters. By framing the January 6 defendants as political prisoners, Trump seeks to rewrite history and erase the horrors of that day. The data paints a clear picture. Those still incarcerated for their roles in the January 6th attack are not victims, but violent offenders. Of those who remain behind bars, 83% committed acts of violence, while 57% assaulted police officers. These facts expose the fallacy of Trump's narrative and highlight the dangers of his proposed pardons. For law enforcement, Trump's position is a betrayal. Organizations that endorsed him must grapple with his willingness to free individuals who assaulted their colleagues. Supporting Trump's agenda means turning a blind eye to the sacrifices made by officers who defended the Capitol and upheld democracy. Ultimately, Trump's promises to pardon January 6 defendants are not about justice or fairness. They are about consolidating power and appeasing his base. By rewarding violent behavior, Trump risks emboldening extremists and normalizing political violence. As we continue monitoring this issue, it is crucial to hold Trump accountable for his rhetoric and actions. The stakes are too high to allow misinformation and authoritarian impulses to erode the foundations of our democracy. Stay informed and engaged as we fight to protect the rule of law and defend the principles that make our country strong. Subscribe to Legal AF on YouTube to stay updated on stories at the intersection of law and politics. Together, we can build a pro-democracy movement that values truth, accountability, and justice.